Back in 1966, a General Motors executive was asked what exactly a Camaro was, because no one had really heard the name before. The answer from the GM executive was that it's a vicious, small animal that eats Mustangs. Well, that has not been true of all Camaros in the past. It's a little bit more true about this 2016 model, perhaps, than it was even back then in 1966. Today we're taking a look at the all-new 2016 Camaro, and this particular model is the over 400 horsepower SS trim. Even though this Camaro very obviously looks like the last generation Camaro, this is a completely different vehicle under the hood. This is actually kind of an interesting hybrid, because what GM did to create this Camaro is they took their Cadillac ATS, basically in the coupe form, they put a Chevy body on it, a Chevy interior inside it, and then they took the engine from the Corvette Stingray and they jammed it right here under the hood. The genetics of the Camaro are important to understand, because this is competing in a very different kind of segment than the Camaros did when I was a kid, because back then the Challenger didn't exist. It had already become extinct and had not yet been resurrected, and all we had was a Ford Mustang that was not sold really in international markets. The Camaro and the Mustang were really just domestic American vehicles only, and they didn't really try and compete with any of the European entries. Today, however, we have a newer, lighter Mustang that is sold worldwide, and that caused General Motors to reach deep into their engineering parts bin and pull out all the bits that they use to compete with European luxury sedans. Therefore, this Camaro can really honestly be compared to a BMW 4 Series, and in this trim, a BMW M4 with a completely straight face. Obviously, I'm talking about driving dynamics because the styling is very different than any of the European performance sedans. We have this very aggressive, perhaps even slightly cartoonish looking front end right here. Our model has the optional HID headlamps. We have a lot of LED strips running along right here. Massive cooling grille here because we are in the SS trim with that 6.2 liter V8 engine. Also helping keep the engine cool are these functional hood vents right here. I'd love to know what you think about the styling of the Camaro. Be sure and comment down there in the comment section down below. There was a time where the Camaro and the Mustang were considered small and light, and then of course there was a time where the Camaro and Mustang were a little on the large side and fairly heavy. For 2016, they've returned to basically small and light compared to the other options available. This is 188.3 inches long, means it's just about the same size as the Ford Mustang and only a hair larger than the BMW 4 Series. The Dodge Challenger is a little bit different than the Camaro or the Mustang. Not only is it a solid foot longer than this Camaro, it's considerably heavier as well. Of course, you can fit 5 people in your Challenger because there is a 3-person bench seat in the back, and it's going to be a little bit more comfortable on cross-country highway trips. The rear of the Camaro looks very angry, although it is perhaps a little bit more demure than the front. We have quad exhaust tips on our SS trim, SS badging of course, this large spoiler right here, and you'll notice how large and flat the rear end of the Camaro is. This is to help improve aerodynamics. You'll notice these strong haunches right here over the rear tires and this very flat rear end. Things start out with a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, very much like the Cadillac ATS or the BMW 4 Series. This 2-liter turbo produces 275 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. Then you step up into the optional 3.6-liter V6 engine, which produces 335 horsepower and 284 pound-feet of torque. Of course, we're testing the SS trim, and that means that we get the 6.2-liter V8 engine out of the Corvette Stingray. It produces 455 horsepower and 455 pound-feet of torque when it's put under this hood right here. All engines are mated to your choice of either a 6-speed manual transmission or an 8-speed automatic, and that's 2 more gears than you find over there in the Ford Mustang. Basically the same thing that we see over there in the BMW or in the Dodge. Also worth noting is that this 6.2-liter V8 engine actually produces more torque than the 5.2-liter flat plane crank engine that we see in the Ford Mustang GT350. It produces less power, but actually more torque. Front seat comfort is very comparable to the Mustang, but I would say that these seats are 1 notch below the Dodges and about 2 notches below what we find in the BMW 4 Series. We do have a tilt-telescopic steering column with a large range of motion that makes it a lot easier to drive a manual transmission for people of various heights. We do have the optional multi-way power driver's seat and leather seat surfaces in our vehicle, but you won't find adjustable lumbar support of any description. We just have 2-way adjustable headrests. You really ought to consider these rear seats emergency back seats. I can't sit upright or anywhere near upright in this rear area. I can't even cock my head and put my back all the way on the seat back. These seats really ought to be reserved for small children or luggage. It appears that Chevy has no illusions about the size of the rear seat. That's why they make this a 100% folding rear seat back. The Camaro inherits the lightweight construction and the sharp driving dynamics from the Cadillac ATS. Those are very good things, but it also inherits the relatively small trunk from the ATS. The ATS is on the smaller side of its segment, and this Camaro's trunk is positively tiny. At under 10 cubic feet, there are a few convertibles that actually have larger trunks than this. In addition, this opening is quite small. Now, I was able to fit 4 of these 24-inch roller bags in the trunk, but you can fit a decent amount more luggage in the Ford Mustang. Something like a BMW 4 Series will have a considerably larger trunk. It's about 50% larger. Same thing also goes for the Dodge Challenger. A large portion of the problem is this super sexy deck lid. You notice how flat and how large it is, but that really does cut into the trunk space. Some of this also has to do with the overall design of the vehicle and crash structures. Thankfully, they do give us hidden hinges, so if it fits inside this well, you can actually close the trunk on it. It's just not as handy as some of those larger trunks out there, and therefore I'm going to have to give this a 3 out of 10 when it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index. On the inside, we have those two-way adjustable headrests I mentioned earlier. We are in the SS trim, so we do have SS right there on the leather seats. Again, the leather seats are optional. We are in the model with them. We're also in the model with the ventilated and heated seats, so we do have perforated leather center sections, and as you can see, fairly aggressive bolstering on the seat bottom cushion, but on the seat back cushion itself, it actually is a little bit more moderate, making it more comfortable for larger drivers. The majority of the door is made from hard-touch plastics. You can see that wraps around all in that black section right there, but we do have a soft touch upper armrest right there, so you can lean your arm against the windowsill, soft touch armrest, and this center section right here is also a soft touch material. We have an active light strip running right through this portion of the door in our trim. The light strip is adjusted via the control screen in the center of the dashboard, and it can be adjusted in a variety of different colors. The overall style of the dashboard is a little bit different from the last generation Camaro, but it is still very stylized, as you can see. We have hard plastics upper in the dashboard and soft touch plastics lower in the dashboard around the airbag here for the front passenger. We have a touchscreen infotainment system right here in the center of the console, the 2 different sizes, 7-inch and this 8-inch screen. On the passenger side, we have a small bin-style glove compartment that was not able to fit a tablet computer inside there. General Motors, and of course Chevy specifically, has had a number of different infotainment systems over the past few years, but they appear to be coalescing around this one software version that is very similar to Cadillac Q that we see in most of the modern Cadillac models. A big change for 2016 is that most Chevy models now include either standard or optional in very low trim packages, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto integration, which is what you're seeing right here. Below the infotainment screen, you'll see the controls for our heated and ventilated seats in our particular model. You'll also see a temperature readout because we have the dual zone climate control in our model. The rest of the buttons for the dual zone climate control are all here across this section and these small buttons right down here. For the front defogger and the rear defroster, we can sync the 2 sides together. You can enable or disable the auto mode. Now you may be wondering where the temperature toggle is for these, and it's actually this ring around the air vent right here. You'll notice as I turn it, that number in this little display changes. We have 2 sides, of course, because we do have the dual zone climate control in our vehicle. The model that we're testing does have the 6-speed manual transmission. Reverse is all the way over to the right and then up. And this transmission also has an electromechanical gate in it. Depending on the RPMs of the engine and the way you're driving, a gate may engage that actually causes you to go from 1st to 4th gear instead of 2nd. You can always go from 1st to 3rd if you so desire, but that gate tries to encourage you to go sort of diagonally across to 4th gear for optimum fuel economy. If you want to take life into your own hands, we do have a stability and traction control button. We also have a drive mode button that allows us to choose between Tour, Sport, Track, and then a Snow and Ice mode, which in a vehicle that has this much low-end power definitely is handy in the wet weather. We also have an electric parking brake right back here, which I found a little bit disappointing. In a vehicle like this, I would have preferred a traditional handbrake, but it is nice that it has this because it does automatically activate with the manual transmission. If, for instance, someone else is driving it and they're not really used to putting the transmission in gear when they stop the vehicle, this will automatically engage, keep it from rolling back somewhere. We also have a 12-volt power outlet on the right side. Keep in mind that in a rear-wheel drive vehicle, the transmission has to go somewhere, and that transmission is actually right here under the center console. That's why if we move back over here to the shifter, you'll notice it's actually vibrating slightly because that's actually connected to the transmission, not like a vehicle that uses cables or rods to connect the transmission, which makes it feel more isolated. That means that when we open this softly padded center console, it is fairly small. You can see that we can just barely fit a wallet inside. You'll find the USB and auxiliary input right there as well. On the right side of the tunnel, we have 2 cup holders, one slightly larger than the other, although they were both able to accommodate large takeout drinks. On the driver's side, we find a partial LCD instrument cluster. We still have a physical tachometer and a physical speedometer, but everything else that you're seeing is a large LCD in the middle. The display is customizable via this menu system. We simply go down to settings, and then we can choose between 3 different views. We have a standard view, we have a technology view, which gives us a look very similar to what we've seen in other GM pickup trucks. You can see we have this sort of circular center and then some additional gauges on the left and right side. We get fewer gauges total, however, than we saw in that other display mode. You can also choose a media mode, which gives us a slightly different theme. Heads-up displays are notoriously difficult to film, however, this is a very crisp display in person. I would actually say this is second probably to the BMW and Volvo systems, which tie for first place currently on the market in general. This is sharper and crisper than anything we see from Lexus or Toyota. The contents of this display can be changed as well, so right now we're taking a look at the G meter there on the left. We also have a tachometer in a bar across the bottom, so if I rev the engine, you'll see that sort of go up there right like that. We have a digital speedometer as well. The steering wheel in our SS trim is leather wrapped. We also have perforated leather on each of the sides. We have mild sport grips right up top, flat bottom, SS right there on that as well. The button module I showed you earlier is over here on the right side of the steering wheel, along with the dedicated phone hang-up, mute button, and then we also have a voice command button, heated steering wheel button, and then the cruise controls over there. You'll find the volume up and down on a separate section of the steering wheel right here on this side, and you'll find the track forward and backward right there on the other side. On the back of the steering wheel, it may appear that we have shift paddles, but of course we're in the manual transmission version, so these don't actually control the transmission shifts like they do in the automatic. These actually turn on and off the active rev match feature of this vehicle. So instead of having to blip the throttle for downshifts yourself, this will blip the throttle and perfectly match the engine speed to what speed it should be for you to engage that gear without you doing anything. This can be seen kind of as a cheat feature, but it does make driving a little bit easier. The first thing you'll notice about the Camaro, other than obviously this mind-blowing acceleration, is the noise. This vehicle sounds absolutely incredible. This 6.2-liter naturally aspirated V8 is easily the best sounding option in this category. The Mustang sounds great, don't get me wrong, and the GT350 sounds incredible as well, but nothing can quite match that sound of a large V8 engine. Perhaps the hilarity in that statement, however, is that this is technically a small block Chevy V8. Now, as I said earlier, these are not shift paddles on the steering wheel in the manual transmission version, obviously because we have a manual transmission. You use them to turn the rev matching system on and off. I'll show you exactly what I mean here. So right now we're in 4th gear. I'm going to put the clutch pedal in. I'm going to move the transmission selector over to 6th gear. Nothing happens there because, of course, it's a little bit slow. If I move it into 3rd gear, however, we get that blip. 2nd, we get that blip. 1st, we get an even bigger blip. And it holds the RPMs there, so that's the perfect RPM for me to engage the clutch for 2nd gear, for instance, and then we can rock it off into the distance. Obviously, we need to talk about acceleration next, because acceleration is incredible in this vehicle. We ran from 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds with this manual transmission. Now keep in mind, I'm not a professional driver. A professional driver could likely get better 0 to 60 times. If, however, you get the automatic transmission, you'll lose about half a second in that 0 to 60 time, and you'll be down there around 3.9 or 4.0 every single time, as long as you have enough traction in the rear. That's thanks to the 8-speed automatic transmission that we get optional in the Camaro. An 8-speed automatic is not too common in this mass market segment, although Chrysler has been using them in the Challenger and the Charger for a short while. Thanks to the 8-speed automatic transmission, acceleration is excellent regardless of which engine you get. The 2.0-liter turbocharged engine will go from 0 to 60 in 5.4. The 3.6 should do it in about 5.1. In terms of comparisons, this is definitely faster than the 0 to 60 time you get in the Mustang GT or the Dodge Challenger SRT 392. Depending on the drivers and the transmissions involved, this may even be faster than a GT350. This Camaro with an 8-speed automatic transmission is likely going to beat most drivers in a GT350 because it's a manual transmission only. As you'd expect from a performance vehicle, the brakes on this Camaro are enormous, and that is one of the big differences between this and certain Mustang GT models, because we get the upgraded brakes standard on the SS trim. You can actually get even more upgraded brakes if you want to, but a decent upgrade over the base Camaro brakes already comes on this model, and that's not what we get over there in the Mustang. That explains some of the price difference between those two models. That's also what allows this vehicle to go from 60 to 0 in an incredibly short 104 feet. 104 feet is actually shorter than something like an Alfa Romeo 4C, even though that is an ultra-light carbon fiber vehicle, and this doesn't use really any exotic construction. Instead, what Chevy does is they give you wide grippy tires and absolutely enormous brakes. The brakes are a good thing too, because this Camaro can go incredibly fast. Perhaps the biggest difference between this generation of the Camaro and the previous generation of the Camaro is the handling. And I'm not talking about absolute grip numbers, I'm talking about the finesse. And this really is where the relationship between this and the Cadillac ATS comes into play. Because the Cadillac ATS, honestly, is one of the best feeling compact luxury sedans available in terms of its steering feel, in terms of its handling dynamics, etc. It honestly beats the BMW 3 Series and the BMW 4 Series easily, and all of that translates right down to this Camaro. The steering ratio in the Camaro is very well balanced. It's very easy to tell exactly where the front of the vehicle is doing, and even though we have electric power steering, we get some feedback from the front tires, so you know what the tires are doing on the road. This is another area where the current generation Mustang is impressive, but the Camaro is just that next level. However, unlike some vehicles out there that excel at finesse, chassis dynamics, and feel, etc., but let you down a little bit on the grip, the Camaro definitely does not let you down on grip. Now, we don't have access to a skid pad here at Alex Autos, but some people out there do, and they have implied that this should approach 1G in terms of lateral acceleration, which is excellent. That's really Dodge Viper territory. However, unlike a Dodge Viper, it doesn't feel like the Camaro is secretly plotting against you the whole time. Now, if you put this transmission in second or third gear and you romp on the throttle, the rear end will still get a little bit wiggy on you. However, the stability control system really reins things back in very nicely and very smoothly. But it waits a little bit longer than some of the other vehicles out there, so it makes you feel like you can have a little bit more fun in the Camaro than some of those alternatives. Thanks to the optional magnetic ride control that our particular tester is equipped with, the ride feels more like a luxury performance car. This soaks up bumps fairly well out on the pavement. It doesn't feel rock hard stiff like previous generations of the Camaro do. Instead, the suspension feels definitely firm, but also very confident. There's some slight performance benefits here too, because if you're driving out on rough pavement, you don't really want a rock hard suspension because it can actually cause you to sort of skip across that pavement surface, sort of like a pebble, and a suspension like this that can adapt to it actually helps improve your grip. Of course, the main reason that I would get the magnetic ride suspension is that it makes the Camaro much more daily driver livable than a wide variety of performance vehicles. Cabin noise is a little bit difficult to comment on in the Camaro because, of course, this engine makes an awful lot of noise. It sounds incredible while it's doing it too. This engine is very, very loud. Even though we have been having an incredible amount of fun in the Camaro SS, fuel economy has been fairly impressive for a vehicle of this type. We've been averaging 17.8 miles per gallon, and I know that doesn't sound very impressive. However, most vehicles in this category will get considerably worse mileage. The smaller engine in the Ford Mustang scored right about the same as this, but the 6.4-liter V8 engine, which isn't that much larger in the Dodge Challenger, definitely scores lower than this if you're having a similar amount of fun. And that 6.4-liter V8 in the Dodge does everything it can with cylinder deactivation, the 8-speed automatic transmission, etc., in order to try and give you better fuel economy. Obviously, the 3.6-liter V6 engine will give you even better fuel economy, and the top fuel economy will be in the 8-speed automatic transmission with that 2-liter turbo. It's not going to give you as much fun as this 6.2, but it will get you a few more miles between gas pumps. One last comment before we go is that I would definitely recommend getting the blind spot monitoring system with the Camaro. The sexy side profile and these very short windows on the sides means that we have pretty bad side visibility in terms of those blind spots right there behind me. So I would definitely get the blind spot monitoring system. The backup camera is very handy to help you back up because, as you can see behind me, that rear window is also fairly small as well. When it comes to pricing and comparisons, you have to keep in mind that General Motors and Ford especially treat their V6 and their 4-cylinder engines a little bit differently. For General Motors, the 4-cylinder turbocharged engine is the base engine. For Ford, it's actually an up-level engine over the V6, and it actually produces more power and better performance times over there in that Mustang. The Camaro starts at $25,700, and that gets you that 2-liter 4-cylinder engine and the 6-speed manual transmission. If you want to take the top off of any Camaro, it's about $7,000 on top of whatever the regular coupe price is. The V6 version starts at $27,195, which is not a huge jump, and the reason for that is you can basically get your 2-liter 4-cylinder engine and your 3.6-liter V6 engine similarly equipped. Basically, all the same options are available with either engine. Now, personally, I wouldn't buy a base Camaro. I would add a few options. My essential options would be the RS package for $1,950. It gets you these excellent HID headlamps. They're definitely a lot better than the base halogens. You also get LED tail lamps and a slightly different appearance to the vehicle. I would also add the nearly $1,300 heavy-duty brake and cooling package. On the 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, it adds auxiliary engine cooling, and on all the vehicles, it adds upgraded brakes somewhat similar to what we're seeing in this vehicle. Obviously, they're not quite as beefy as we get on the SS trim. However, it does upgrade it to 4-piston Brembo calipers up front. I'd also get the $800 tech package, which includes the Bose audio system and the 8-inch color touchscreen display. The base vehicle has a 7-inch color touchscreen, but the 8-inch that we see in this vehicle just fills out the dashboard a little bit better. The last option is likely going to be controversial, but I would also check the $1,495 option box for the 8-speed automatic transmission. And not just on the 2-liter or 3.6, I'd also get it on this 6.2-liter V8 engine right here. The reason is that it is quite simply faster than the 6-speed manual transmission. This vehicle right here with the manual transmission may sometimes be able to beat a Ford GT350. It really depends on how good the manual transmission driver is. If everybody is hitting their shift points absolutely perfectly, this is going to be several tenths of a second slower 0 to 60 than that Ford. However, if you get the 8-speed automatic transmission, which is not available over there in the GT350, this is likely going to be consistently faster than the average GT350 driver. Now, if I were a rational Camaro shopper, I would probably stop at the 2LT trim, although I would get it nicely loaded. I would also stop at the 2-liter turbo. $30,795 is where the 2LT trim starts. I would probably add the RS package, the brake and cooling package again, the 8-speed automatic transmission package, and then the convenience package, which becomes available on the 2LT trim. The convenience package adds the excellent heads-up display that we've been seeing in this particular model. Total out the door, that would be about $36,730 again for that 2-liter turbo. The fire-breathing 6.2-liter V8 engine also comes in 2 different trim levels, 1SS and 2SS. Similar feature break between the two that we see down there in the 2LT, although the 2SS adds even more feature content like a standard heads-up display. $37,295 is the starting price for this engine, and the 2SS starts at $42,295. As I said, even on the SS trim, I would break from convention and get the 8-speed automatic transmission. I would also get the 2-mode exhaust that our model has on it right here because it makes it sound absolutely incredible out on the road. And lastly, I would get the magnetic damper package as well because it helps smooth out the ride on the highway. It actually has a slight performance benefit as well. That means that my out-the-door price on the SS trim would be around $46,000. If that sounds a little pricey to you, it's important to keep in mind that the Camaro SS actually slots between the Mustang GT and the GT350 in terms of overall performance. Of course, some people are suspecting that this will actually perform better than the GT350 around a track. That wouldn't actually surprise me because I do like the way this vehicle feels. It feels a little bit more direct, a little bit more nimble than that GT350. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was actually faster on a track, even though it's not quite as fast 0 to 60. Brand loyalty is extraordinarily important in this segment, just like it is in the pickup truck segment. So let's dive right into the trickiest comparison first, and that would be the Ford Mustang. Again, Ford and GM had very different missions in mind with their 4-cylinder engine and their 6-cylinder engine in their vehicles. This vehicle starts out with the 2-liter 4-cylinder engine as a base engine. The Mustang starts out with its V6 engine as the base, and then you have to option up into the EcoBoost engine. That means that the character of the vehicles rather than the performance ends up being more of a differentiator, especially if we're talking just about the manual transmission versions, because the base version of this will go against the base V6 over there in the Mustang. The V6 version of this really goes against the 4-cylinder turbocharged engine over there in the Mustang. How you feel about turbochargers and the way they deliver power really will determine how you feel about the 4-cylinder engine versus the V6 in both engines. So if you don't mind the way a turbo behaves, then I would actually take this 4-cylinder engine over the base V6 over there in the Ford Mustang. However, if you're not a fan of turbochargers, then I would not take the Ford Mustang's 2.3-liter 4-cylinder engine over this V6 engine, if that makes any sense to you. Both the 2-liter engine in the Camaro and the 2.3-liter engine in the Ford Mustang will display some turbo lag, especially at lower RPMs. On the other hand, both V6 engines feel very traditional. They have very linear power delivery curves. There's going to be a much bigger difference in character when you add the automatic transmission, and that really is more important to most shoppers because most Camaros and most Mustangs leave the dealer lot with an automatic transmission. This vehicle uses an 8-speed automatic transmission behind all 3 engines, and over there in the Mustang, we get a 6-speed automatic transmission. It's also going to feel a little bit more engaging because this transmission shifts faster than the transmission in the Ford. Now, without doubt, you will pay more for that better shifting ability because the Camaro is going to be slightly more expensive than a comparable Ford basically across the board. It really doesn't matter which trim or which engine you get, this is going to be a little bit more expensive than a Ford in terms of actual purchase price at the dealer. This version of the Camaro versus the current generation of the Ford Mustang, the Camaro feels lighter and more nimble, and we get a decent amount more torque out of this engine than we see over there in the Mustang GT. That means that this vehicle is going to be notably faster 0 to 60. Even though Ford recently completely redesigned the Mustang and gave it a fully independent suspension on all 4 corners, this Camaro is borrowing one of the best suspension setups that General Motors makes. I would actually say this is the equal of the current generation BMW M4. And that's not something I can say about the Ford Mustang. The Ford Mustang is a very, very good Mustang, but it's not quite up to this level. Then of course we get the Ford GT350. Now the GT350 is actually going to be a little bit more expensive than the SS. You can't get an automatic transmission in it. You also can't get some of the luxury and convenience features that we get in this model over there in the Ford. Now the Ford is going to be a little bit faster 0 to 60. It also has that very Ferrari-like exhaust note thanks to its unique 5.2-liter V8 engine. However, I'm hearing rumors that this is actually going to be faster around a track. Obviously, I don't have access to a track. I don't have access to both cars at the same time to really give you that number, so you will have to check out some of those other performance channels if that's something that really concerns you. Since I've already uncorked the Genie, let's talk about the BMW 4 Series next. The 4 Series starts with a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, just like the Camaro, has an 8-speed automatic transmission or a 6-speed manual transmission, just like the Camaro. From there, you step up to a 6-cylinder engine that is a little bit different because we get a 3-liter turbocharged engine in the BMW and a 3.6-liter direct injection engine in the Camaro. Performance figures are fairly similar, 2-liter turbo to 2-liter turbo, but the V6 in the Camaro is going to be a little bit slower than the 3-liter turbo we see in the BMW. Then we get the artist formerly known as the BMW M3 Coupe, the M4. On the surface of things, you may think that the M4 is going to be lighter and more nimble because it's the European option, and this is the big American muscle car option, but that's not necessarily true, because the Camaro is heavily based on the Cadillac ATS, and this really is where those performance car roots come into play, because Cadillac, of course, has the ATS-V. Going a little bit off track, if you compare the BMW and the Cadillac, I actually prefer the way the Cadillac behaves out on the road in terms of driving dynamics. And that really is where the DNA of the Camaro comes into play, because this shares all of the basic driving DNA that we see in that Cadillac ATS to excellent effect. Then on top of that, they've jammed in a very large 6.2-liter V8 engine. That's why this isn't the direct competitor to the BMW M4. The M4, of course, uses that lighter weight turbocharged engine. That's exactly what Cadillac is doing with the Cadillac ATS-V as well. Those are the direct competitors over there. But this is quite an interesting sideways option because we get this large 6.2-liter V8 engine under the hood, but we get all of those excellent lightweight driving dynamics from the Cadillac ATS. The result is that even though this has more weight on the front axle because of this large engine, this actually feels a little bit more communicative and a little bit more nimble than the current generation BMW M4 feels to me. Now, I'm not quite sure which would be faster around a track, but my suspicion is that they would be very, very close. One thing's for sure, however, 0 to 60 times are also incredibly close, whether you get the automatic transmission or the manual transmission, and that's because this does have that new 8-speed automatic transmission under the hood. So you get the 6-speed manual and you're rowing your own. It could be a toss-up. The Dodge Challenger is really only in this comparison because there are so few rear-wheel drive 2-door sports coupes available in the United States. Because the Challenger really isn't the same kind of thing as the Mustang or the Camaro. Comparatively, it's enormous. The size difference is also apparent on the inside of the Dodge because the interior feels enormous. The seats are wider, they're bigger, they're more plushly padded. The rear seats actually have enough headroom for an adult to sit in the back. You can fit 3 people across the bench seat in the rear. You can actually fit child seats back there very easily as well. It's just a much larger and bigger vehicle. When it comes to the performance models, and that would be the SRT 392 and the SRT Hellcat, the important thing to keep in mind is that Chrysler was not able to make as many body changes as they would have liked for that model. And that means that the tires up front especially are going to be a little bit narrow for the weight of the vehicle. This is going to handle definitely better than the Challenger in either the SRT 392 or the SRT Hellcat trims. The Challenger feels more like a classic American muscle car out on the road, whereas this feels more like a European sports car. Until, of course, you press the accelerator pedal and the exhaust opens up and you get that 6.2-liter V8 sound, and then it really doesn't sound like anything from Europe. Until we get a chance to see what Ford and Chrysler have planned for the future, the Camaro is my top pick in this segment right now. with the caveat that if you're looking for this kind of performance in a more comfortable vehicle and you're looking to give up a little bit of that performance and handling in order to get that extra comfort, then I would get the SRT 392. The SRT 392 is an incredibly good value in my book. It's 485 horsepower, it's an awful lot of fun, it gives you a very comfortable ride. However, this is definitely going to be the better handling vehicle. The Chrysler is going to be more practical, it has a bigger trunk, a bigger back seat, etc., but it's just not as much fun as the Camaro. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes. Be sure and check out those related videos down there across the bottom of your screen. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Find us over at alexandautos.com, and I'll see you next week.